Hey Aggies, it's Andrew from the New Mexico State University Financial Aid and Scholarship Services. In this video, we'll talk about dependency status and how it relates to your FAFSA application. Your dependency status is what determines whether or not you will need to provide information about your parents or guardians on the FAFSA form. It's important to note that you cannot be considered independent just because your parents or guardians won't help you pay for college. You can also not be considered independent simply because they choose not to provide their information for the application. The stance that the federal government currently holds is that it's primarily your and your family's responsibilities to pay for a college education. Generally, this means that you are assumed to have the full support of your parents if you are a dependent. However, there are many factors that could lead to you being classified as independent. Let's go over those factors now. First, your age. Ask yourself, will you be 24 years old or older by the 1st of January in the year in which you'll be applying? For example, if you were to apply for the 2022-2023 FAFSA, check if you will be 24 or older by January 1st of 2022. If this does apply to you, you will be considered independent. Next, your marital status. If you are married, you are considered an independent student for the purposes of the FAFSA. Are you separated but not divorced? You will also be considered independent. Are you currently serving in the U.S. Armed Forces on active duty? This does not include being on active duty for training purposes. However, enlistees with the National Guard or reserves who are on active duty for purposes other than training do count. If you answered yes to any of these questions, you would be considered independent. Next up, are you a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? This condition only applies if you have previously engaged in active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces, or were a National Guard or Reserves enlistee engaged in active duty, or you were a cadet or midshipman at a service academy. You also must have been released from service in a capacity other than dishonorable. You will then be considered an independent student. You should also say yes when prompted by this question if you will be a veteran by the final deadline of that aid year's FAFSA application. Will you be working towards a master's or doctorate degree? Designations of these types of degrees can include MA, MBA, MD, JD, PhD, EdD, and more. In most cases, if you're a graduate student, you will be considered independent. The sixth criteria is whether you have people who are dependent on you for their financial support. If you have any children or other dependents who receive more than half of their support from you, you will be considered independent. For example, if your grandparents live with you and you provide more than half of their financial support, this would apply to you, even if you do not have children. The next few questions deal with your legal status in relation to your family's situation. If, after the age of 13, both of your parents were deceased, you were in foster care, or you were a ward or dependent of the court, then you will be considered independent. Additionally, if you are currently in a legal guardianship, or you are an emancipated minor, either one determined in a legal sense by a judge, you will also be considered independent. Keep in mind that this does not apply to legal custody, only a legal guardianship. Finally, if you are an unaccompanied youth who is homeless, or you support yourself and are at risk of becoming homeless, you may be considered independent. However, this does require a determination on the part of your financial aid advisor. If you think this applies to you, please complete your FAFSA before contacting your financial aid advisor, once they have received your application. That's the end of our list. Did none of them apply? That means that you will most likely be considered dependent, and you will need to provide information related to your parents on the application. Now that you know about these criteria, keep them in mind when putting in your information. You are now prepared to answer questions about dependency on the FAFSA.